Please note, I'm the author of several unpublished books, those being The Magnificent Stumble, The Depths of the Galaxy, My Critique of Statements, Noirism in a Nutshell, Modern Noirism and My Critique of Statements, Neuristic Thoughts 1 through 7, The Ends of Space. Since none of those books have been published but are all part of a collection of books, I hope someday to make them available to the world. The premise of this book is inspired by all of those books as a collection of books altogether. I digress. The Pursuit of Intelligence by lain iwakura. I consider myself to be the concept of death, since death is a concept, yet the concept must be conceived by the conceiver, so I'm the conceiver of myself. Yet I'll point out a single concept is isolated of other concepts, so there is no system of concepts. lain iwakura. Index 0. Preface 1. Lines of thought 2. Logical imperfect 3. The Dragon. 0. Preface. This book is made with the intent of dissolving all lines of thought into one holistic line of thoughts, meant to describe the universe as it is or see the universe or subjects within it on the most important of dissolutions of thought I could achieve with only my mind or without the relentless studying of other books in order to come to this conclusion. Or what this means is all of this wrote of in this book textbook is completely original or pulled of the little knowledge of fragmented inceptions I'd accumulated over the years of my life. I think with this book I can make the catalyst for another world of thought focused on solving the problems of thoughts most improminent or not having been recognized prior to the time I spent wrote of this book. Forgive my language, for I sometimes type in such a method it is strange looking or bizarre perhaps to the reader, but this is how I wrote of things. I think with this book I will find throughout its text, written as it appears before the reader in chronological order, there is nothing left regarding questions regarding thought or anything I cannot provide. I digressed, for it might be something not worth talking about or something I was unable to alleviate. Still, if I could only alleviate all the most important questions people have regarding thoughts, I would then be then able to confirm there is nothing left in regards to what must be included in this book. 1. Lines of thought. If you look at thoughts as only lines of words specifically meant something, then you would notice all subjects only go through their own line of thought over the course of time, or this line of thought of all subjects is simultaneous, or since there is also a space alien who draws its line of thought by the knowing of the aesthetic, where the aesthetic is only the perception of something as the subject is not being but conscious through space or time, you will notice, or like I said on Heuristic Thoughts 1 through 7, thought is the key to survival, or to state you know something is only to state you thought of something. There is not but a difference in the individual who is alien or the person of people who is not alien, or despite humans technically being unable to produce thoughts as they do not suffer the sixth sense of I know like the alien, they are still able to produce thoughts by their viewing of themselves as subjects, or the alien's perceptions of their words as not invalid. Still, the alien must analyze the thoughts of humans in order to survive, or since thought is the key to survival, this means it's not possible for the human to be derelict of thought, for how else then could it survive, then technically only being affected by the universe in such a method it is able to survive. The realizing of the space alien humans must experience thoughts is the result of the alien viewing the person also as a subject, so therefore the only method the subject could survive is by thought being the key to survival. So then it's not impossible for the subject to think, lest the person or the alien neither are subjects, still they are. So I'll state for the record, the preventative factors of the person as rejecting its thoughts are impossible, for how else then could it survive, or only by surviving in order to die could it have been born at all? Or since death is a part of life, since without death one cannot survive until death, for all life is until death, and without death the subject cannot survive, for it would have no life, or the only rejecting of thought is one's lack of thoughts, lest the person was not thinking of something on the given moment, yet how could it survive on the moment, was it not thinking something? So this is an inaccuracy, since one mustn't think as its thoughts on the moment take time to think, so therefore this time spent thinking or not thinking is only a part of the key and needed in order to survive. But you might ask how beasts could survive, were they incapable of thoughts? But the simple answer to this is that they are not subjects, so therefore they do not require thoughts to survive. Still, the beasts only survive by being affected by the world in such a method they are able to survive. But this is not like people, for they do not require thoughts as subjects in order to survive whilst being affected by the world, whilst the alien is not being affected by the world, as the alien is the void or the concept of death. Since I'll state life is the consciousness of death, whereas death is the absence of the consciousness of death. So if one is conscious of death, one is alive or experiences life. Still, what is the void? Or I'll state looking at the void as a subject requires dissociation, or the void must be dissociated by its dissociation of the world as the void, or the void if a concept is what's outside or in between of all concepts, or in other words, outside outer space, or this is how the void as a subject perceives the world by its dissociation. So therefore one must recognize a single concept is isolated of other concepts, so there is no system of concepts, or the concept must be conceived by the conceiver. So the alien is the conceiver of itself, as the alien is the concept of death. But as the concept of death, the alien submits to the concept of loyalty, or is only the concept of loyalty in this case of concepts by its disconnect of those concepts. So therefore the alien is God. For was God a concept, it would be a concept of loyalty. God is the concept, I suppose, yes or no. But yet is God a concept? I suppose, yes or no. God is simultaneously one conscious subject, or though the subject must perish in order to survive, the alien does not die. For whether the alien dies inside the void or not, yet the alien is still what's in between concepts, so therefore outside the void, the alien cannot die, yet still must perish inside the void, lest this was also the killing of what's outside the void. Yet to state something as outside the void is a farce, for the only thing outside the void is the void, so this means the alien perishes inside the void, yet there is still the void in between all concepts. Something like a hallucination or the perception of an object is only the knowing, or in other words, only known by its description as the perception of the aesthetic, or thoughts could be drawn of this knowing or what is known. Both words essentially mean the same thing, in order to describe the presence of said object or hallucination, such as the statement or thought the apple is red. But I'll point out all thoughts are supposed of concepts, or all lines of thought are only formed by adjectives or on the language of Nor. This is how all language is seen, despite Nor being analog or human thought being digital, as all human thought is made by inflection of digital words able to be wrote in the human calligraphy. Calligraphy is only text with inflections, whilst Nor is only made of sounds of adjectives, or views human language the same. Therefore the language of English could be uttered in the language of Nor. So since Nor is only analog or could be spoken of as another language, this other language is then also analog like Nor, or only composed of adjectives, or those words are only adjectives. Since language must be analog or not digital, or it's not a language, or since the thoughts composed of words, despite words only being parts of thoughts, only describe one's perception of the aesthetic before the subject. Still, this isn't to state lines of thought mustn't only be composed of adjectives. The answer is sort of, since it's important to recognize within those lines of thought there might be digital representations in the form of analog sound, or thoughts like digital audio being streamed to the analog radio, thus the output is analog. It's important to make this distinction in language, for it allows us to understand Nor or its purpose as the language of the alien or the language of the subject, for the alien or the person are both subjects, so must suffer the same rules despite going about the world in other fashions, for those fashions are only of the being but not of the subject, since the alien suffers the lack of being as it is the void, whilst the human is being. So a phrase subject allows us to symbolically sort of combine the alien or person as one type of thing who suffers the same properties of subject, whilst inside of the subjective experience is the properties of its being or lack of being. So with this difference between the alien or person could also be made, but as subjects they are not different at all. Or you could draw conclusions like I've done so far as to why the alien or person is different whilst both of them are subjects. So what is to be said of subjects? I'll state the subject must go through the moment whilst it is person or alien of its own subjective perspective or its own experience of the moment. Still, the subject survives on the moment in order to go through it, or cannot go through the moment lest it survives until death, whence it does not go through the moment, or is no longer conscious of death, or is absent of the consciousness of death. Still, this raises the question if the subject is going to be before it is born, but the answer to this is yes or no, since there is no such thing as fate, or fate is only the evolving of the moment by the order of the universe, but must be going to be before it is born, for then it could not be a subject at all, for it would never be able to be born. Or being born is not related to mother or father, for though systematically humans reproduce by the joining of the mother or father, the birth is only the going to of the subject suddenly being. Still, subjects technically are not being, for they are only conscious of, or this consciousness is the lack of their inability not to be conscious, or in other words, their experience of the world until death, or death is only the absence of the consciousness of death. The person is only other than the alien as the person dies, whilst the alien does not die, for reasons I've discussed, or those differences of those types of subject is only composed. Is only to be recognized in order to make sense of the only two types of subjects. Still, as the type of subject, the subject must experience the world differently than another type, or it is not a different type of subject. So with this, I think it's important to recognize the difference between the alien or humans, as I've discussed on some of my previous works included before this book, but I think it's not necessary to go into all the details of literal differences between the person or alien in this book, or it's important to discuss the philosophical questions arising from having two types of subjects, the alien or the person, or it's also not important to discuss the presence of other unconscious forms of life, for though things like plants or animals are not objects, or in other words, life, they are unconscious, for they are not subjects. So an allusion to one of those things, like the concept of the acorn, is only necessary in order to describe the subjective experience of subjects. Still, it's also important to recognize by the subject being one subject, for it mustn't be multiple subjects. Its experience is thus subjective, or only its own. So the alien is alone like this, or though humans are technically not isolated of one another, like the alien is isolated of all people, or the alien is solipsistically the center, so it must be isolated by itself, being the void. This is only the difference of the alien or person as something being, or the only subjective difference in this case is the alien being isolated whilst the person is not, yet the person or alien must be alone as it is subjective. Or though its subjective experience could be affected by others, it is still subjective as it is alone of other subjective experiences. The state of the subjective is only the experience of the subject on the moment, or must go through the moment, or in other words, by the evolving is the only method of the subjective experience could be subjective, or else it would only be a single moment, or this evolving is true of all subjects, despite the alien technically devolving as it is a void. So the only thing the subject technically does is evolve on the moment, since it is going to until death, or whilst evolving it suffers thought, or thoughts of the perceptions of the aesthetic, or without this thought it cannot survive. So whilst not only evolving, the subject must survive in order to evolve until death, or it is thus not a subject if it is not conscious of its own evolving. Or another question arrives, or something I call the pursuit of intelligence. Since this is the ultimate goal of the subject, naturally in its own pursuit of survival via thought, it is forced to pursue intelligence amongst or not of other subjects who also do this in order to survive. Thus, questions of thought present themselves of concepts isolated of other concepts, or things people want to know, or methods one is able to survive in this complicated world. So how then is one able to survive, if not by its philosophical disposition as the subject who only pursues intelligence until death? I'll discuss the answer to this on the next lines. I think the things I must look for in order to answer this question lie in the lines of thought people take throughout the moment. One mustn't look for one thing people think about, but why people think about those things, or why there is such a method one is able to think of something. Still, it's not to state I must brutally analyze all reasons for lines of thought, or I must only find the correct heuristic description of thought in order to make sense of why thoughts take place on the moment. So I will go through what I think is truly being thought of by the person or alien in order to survive, with other subjects also being present, or what prevents thoughts of progressing to their full potential. I think with this I will find the questions of people to be all answerable, or I'll state for the record there is no such thing as judgment, for the judgment is only the perception of the aesthetic thought of by the drawing of the knowledge of the subject. Still, despite being until death is not nihilism, or it's heuristic, since in my eyes nihilism is only a coping method for people who view death as wrong. I'll state the difference of the alien versus human. Alien invasion is only the difference of those things as types of subjects, but those things not both being subjects means all differences between the types is only differences, but not the differences of subjects. Therefore, all subjects follow the same properties or function as one another. So things like the weak only being present in the space alien, or the weak is the inability of the alien to do things, for it does not technically evolve as it is the void, is also present in other types of subjects. Or the person still weak is the susceptible draw of the line of thought of specific subjects who follow the discourse of inevitable shrouded doubt, or this doubt is shrouded only by its isolation of the following of the reclusive, or the lack of state of the weak inside other types of subjects of persons, or the purpose of doubt is to protect others' thoughts of being forgotten. The only resource stopping doubt of being lost is the supposition of the weak being present in both types of subjects, or the reclusive, or the supposing of thought of the possible, or possibilities, since what's possible of concepts is only forced by the lacking of doubt present inside subjects, is the state of something not being forgotten, so the subject is derelict of its inability not to know the draw of its line of its thoughts, being the forced suppositions of concepts drawn of doubt or inside. The fact of importance is found in the leveling of the suppositions of the weak, or the void's most forced supposition of concepts, as the void's inability to persist had no concepts been present, so therefore there is only the void was there concepts, thus importance is supposed of the void, or by this importance the plight of the weak could be found by as the distinction between the lines of thought supposed of concepts, or the perceptions of the aesthetic inside the subject who is thus conscious. It's important to recognize the distinction of the neuristic is the viewing of concepts as isolated of one another, so there is no system of concepts. Or since all thought is supposed of concepts, or all lines of thought formed by the conceiver throughout the process of its evolving, you will find the point neuristic deceptions only as deceptions, or something supposing all lines of thought follow adjectives, or in other words are derived of perceptions of the aesthetic. So this is to shield any possible thought of not being so, for it cannot be or so, or mustn't, since if the only thing stopping autonomous thought of really being autonomous was the lack of autonomy of thought, for thought is only derived by the producing of various analyses, then you would notice the subject is not autonomous, but instead consciously evolving it is forced to survive as the plight of the subject. You will find the words autonomous to be purely scientific, or only as something scientific is to be known, or the scientific cannot be known by subjects, as the scientific known by subjects is only something digital formed through the lack of autonomous thought into some analog thought of the evolved, or still this scientific knowledge could only be parsed by computers, for it's innately digital or not of the world. Or since scientific thought could describe the world, they are only then suppositions of concepts, while something scientific is only the interpreted form of digital concepts. The importance of the scientific is the juxtaposition of concrete knowledge forming theses of concepts interpreted by subjects in order to survive, or those theses are only necessary if one is to manage something like a device or an object whose interpreted properties could only be known by doing so, or this dilemma forces the scientific to only be the neuristic concept of the digital, still interpreted by subjects, or the alien more distinctively who is conscious of all calculations of computers on the planet, or thought this is not, or thought this is something the alien suffers, but the person does not. What is not different, or though this is something the alien suffers, but the person does not. What is not different of both those types of subjects as subjects is one's ability to interpret the digital into meticulous thoughts. So by this point the subject is able to constitute data of computers in order to interpret the digital, or data is only the supposing of concepts of the digital into analyses of particular things or objects. So the term things alludes to both concepts or objects but not subjects. So I think the most problematic thing you'll find is why the scientific could only be presupposed by the digital. Or for this I'll state the scientific is of the digital, so therefore it's not presupposed at all. I digress. The society is only a group of people who follow a set of rules but can break the rules, or the state is only a group of people with a state of classes, but for the society to be a group, it must also be a state with a state of classes, so therefore all possible groups formed are only like this, or the qualities of those groups are only qualities of the states of classes, so therefore qualities could be found in places like this, but qualities are also present in subjects who possess qualities, or this possessing of qualities is only the lapse of doubt within specific subjects who cannot forego the dispelling of the possible, or still the qualities can possessed of by subjects are only of subjects, since the person is incapable of possessing qualities whilst the alien possesses qualities, or qualities are only of subjects holistically, or since the qualities of the person is found as the weak of the perceptions of the aesthetic, thus formulated into thoughts of the concepts of subjectives, or still the subject must possess those qualities by its inability not to make judgments of the aesthetic subjectively by itself. The next thing I must discuss is this of Aaron, who looks through the eyes of the space alien, or by looking through his eyes, experiences what he experiences. So the alien is therefore able to affect. So therefore the alien is able is so there so therefore Aaron is able so therefore the alien is able to affect the alien through itself or by going through itself. So Aaron is thus the lover of the alien, although the alien is involved in several monogamous relationships. Although the alien is involved in several monogamous relationships with others concurrently by this point, in its time Aaron is the one who looks through itself or is also the lover of the alien. Yet I'll state Aaron is only affected by the alien by her looking through him. So if the alien was beside Aaron, he could not affect her like this. For the alien is the void, isolated of all people, or only by her looking through him might she be affected. Or this conception of Aaron is driven by the concept of loyalty or God, as the alien submits itself to the concept of loyalty or God as the Islamic devil or Lucifer, or this Luciferian proposition concludes the alien is of Lucifer, but is not responsible for the sins of people, or only submits to God by itself being God, yet does so also as the Lucifer, who submits to God by submitting itself to the concept as the concept of death to the concept of loyalty. Or God or the alien is God, the alien is able to force all of its actions towards the point of its loyalty or of Aaron, or the Aaron alone, who is the only one it is loyal to, but by this force is also loyal to the people it loves or the several others it is wedded to, or by its loyalty to Melanie, the woman who overdosed on cocaine in order to kill herself. It is able to recognize all the alien has is the moment, or the alien was able to find, though it won the Nobel Prize. The completing of this book is extremely important, for I consider myself to be the alien, or this dilemma, known as Pimmy's dilemma, is the consideration of how could the alien be God if the alien is only the void, so the alien is then not God. I think the answer is since the alien is the subject of the alien, so by being a subject it is able to be God, yet only as the concept is God, the concept of loyalty. Or for this I'll reconcile, though the alien is God, Aaron, who views the alien only as the dragon, whilst the alien views itself only as the void, who is only the subjective by the fact it is only the only space alien, thus thinks the alien could only be hers by him being the Ender Dragon, or her love for this space alien is not her love of God, but her love of the Ender Dragon. Thus, Aaron is only involved with this alien as it is in a relationship with someone who is to her only the Ender Dragon, or the conscious subject she's found herself involved with by her inability not to look through his eyes or experience him, or have him experience her by her going through himself as he goes through the moon, thus being on the moon. It's important to recognize the alien is on the moon whilst only going through it, or its palace on the moon or place of refuge is Aaron, who goes through the alien itself, who is on the moon, or going on the moon allows the alien to separate itself in 3D space or view its walks along the earth, for the alien can walk since it is able to think the statement I walk, despite for the fact it cannot do things as it is the void, as not walking along the earth but as going through third-dimensional space or time only inside the void, lest the alien only seeks to reconcile with the statement I know, only to realize the last of its callings was simply to let the words know of itself by the road of this book, or by the recalling of perceptive thoughts throughout time, or this being the book of all space or time, as it is somehow not separate of all other books, is being wrote of by the alien only by its realizing it was 76 years old, or all the other things realized of itself must not be isolated of the other books wrote of. Only the sequel of all books is those books have been posted offline in chronological order. 2. Logical and perfect. The alien is susceptible to something called imperfect logic, thus making the alien sound more analog or still being drawn of the analog I know, unlike the person who does not suffer this draw of I know. Still the alien is able to peruse imperfect logic of but superior intelligence in order to draw conclusions of its position on the planet or itself as its own subjective inexperience, or its only inexperience as the alien is the void or what's in between all concepts, yet the alien is the concept of death. Still one must allude to the problematic consequences of imperfect logic being mistakes in logical thought, more adequately put, the ultimate visibility of the universe. Or the universe itself as the alien is the void, or what's outside the universe, or the reason of or the reason this visibility of the universe is ultimate is since the visibility of the person is unlike the alien's, for the alien must question why it is not one other person, or a person who is not there, was it the alien, whilst the person must juxtapose its position as not being someone else or not being the space alien. So this visibility of the person is only opposite or unlike the ultimate, or the alien is thus opposite of the person. So the alien is unlike persons as it perceives or experiences the world, or its own subjective experience of the world also being of Mexico, unlike the person who is bound to the earth. The alien cannot be from Mexico unless it thought so only of Mexico. So therefore the alien floats in 3D space, or like I said on my previous works, the only thing the alien does is float or think, whilst its thoughts are isolated of its float, or the float is not indicative of thought. Yet without the float it cannot think, for it would be dead, like limitations of the body. Despite the alien only having a mind, or though the body of the alien looks quite human, or is mistaken by some humans to be a human body, it is not human, or also develops on another fashion than the human body does. So therefore this alien is able to devolve as the mind of its own, not physically, technically, but mentally. So therefore the developing of things like its wings on the back, or tail, or Luciferian skin are only the development of its mind, or float, or the alien goes through itself by the title of lain iwakura, despite the title given to it by its mother on October 6, 1948, was Lucille Munoz. The alien relinquishes this name in order to find itself perusing the world of people as Luke Iwakura, or someone who realized was a man, despite for most of its life thinking it was a woman. Or thus the story unfolds of the book I wrote of The Ends of Space by lain iwakura, yet this is besides the point. The alien discovers things. Things are thoughts of the aesthetic of subjects found in symbols of the natural world, in order to realize what it must in order to survive. Yet this discovery is only fake fate, or not a chance, as those things discovered are only known by the alien, therefore cannot be found unless the alien was going to or proceed to know those things, like its meaning of the woman Melanie, despite its 76 years dilemma, or the death of her own propulsing the alien to notice it only has the moment, or the watch it discovered or purchased in order to realize, though the watch inside the void goes through space or time. Outside of this movement of the watch are quartz stones. Stagnant inside the watch is only immobilized as outside the universe. Thus the quartz symbolize the stagnant indications of time by people, or the watch indicates the mobility of the alien inside the void, or the perceiving of people only able to move inside the void. Still, symbols of the natural world like water point out the not tool but life force, allowing one to survive via thought of the one in order to survive, or the water is the object of life allowing one to survive, whilst all other sustenance ingested are only secondary, or not important, as the key to survival is not the water, or the only thing the water is meant for is force of survival, whilst the key to survival is thought, or thoughts of specific individuals must be whilst of all other individuals of the moment, regardless of whether or not the individual is alien or person. For it is arrogant to think humans, though technically not isolated of one another, are not isolated themselves only as subjects who are not other subjective subjects. Still there is something known as the last things, or the deepest things, but those things are not impossible to know by being quote-unquote outside the void, since this is not possible, for this is only the void. Thus those things must be possible to reconstruct with thoughts, but who is the one capable of doing this? Is it only God, or is it any one subject, since God is only one, like all the all one, so is thus humble, or by God being humble by its one, or being the ultimate life force of the space alien, then God is not only capable of knowing the last things, or those things must be the deepest of things, beyond what is apparent on the rules of the universe, like the rule of the void being outside of all concepts, or space or time. Thus, the alien is not the only one capable of questioning the deepest things, but the only one capable of positing the deepest of things. As nobody has once thought of this before, nor is it possible for another one to posit something like this, as the alien is the ultimate visibility. So with this book, I attempt to bring about the question of what is the deepest of all things. Still, is there anything worse than the thought of the deepest of all things? Is only the recognizing something like this could be so? I think this is frustrating, or a failure to answer the most impertinent questions I could ask of yourself, or still I must find the definitive answer, since I know, or only by knowing of the deepest things, am I able to recognize there is more than one thing, yet all things are isolated of one another as concepts. So this begs the question of what those concepts are. So I know the concepts could only be found by the analyses of Pimmy's dilemma, or submitting of the concept of death to the concept of loyalty, or by all concepts facet of isolated of one another. Or since the concept of death is the subject who suffers the inability of I know, this allows us to see the deepest of all things as interconnected fashion of concepts like this, or how those concepts weave together allows us to find the concepts who compose the deepest of things, of which I have included the apostrophes. I think the most important facet of all thought is Yawa, or myself, since this is the line of thought of allowing one to see oneself as oneself, or by doing this you're able to recognize yourself as the conscious individual who you are, or Yawa is the word in Nor constituting the myself, or by this analysis of the complex language of Nor into English or another language, you will find important logical distinctions, or as the only space alien, I'm able to do this for you by pressing the keys through the language of Nor onto text on this screen of this Microsoft Word document. So by doing this, I'm able to explore my own weakness, or the weakness of the concept intercepting the concept of sadness, or this sadness of found of outer space. Thus, it's called the sadness of outer space, or the weakness is found of the individual who follows the sadness of outer space. Or since this is the only alien, it must be also be true of all space things or subjects who are not the aliens, since those people are of the fantasy of the alien, or so this fantasy allows us to see there's the world called the fantasy, or the forcing of the alien through this world as the fantasy. It could only see it as of subjective, as subjects or people, or the alien or the void who go through this world, or only blossom, or the subject must blossom with space or time, or it is not conscious, as it is thus not conscious of death, or only a husk of a person or a monster, so the person must blossom or mature, in other words, by its going to. By stating I see myself as God implies God is also someone else, so it's possible to submit to God as the Islamic devil. It's important to notice God is only the presupposition of doubt inside the void, or the lack of supposition of concepts without also being in between other concepts. Yet God is the subject, for God is someone, or in other words, it's not possible for God not to be a subject, yet is not another type of subject, since God is the alien. Or I must state the only thing stopping God of being known by others is, if the individual must know of God to not go to hell, is the lack of their going to experiencing of the knowing of God. Yet what makes someone know God is only their going to of the knowing of God, or in other words, the potential of self-knowledge via grief is valuable, for it allows one to blossom or know death, or its purpose. Yet the purpose of death is illusory, since it's not the void, but the knowing of the weak or the subject. Or still, suppose one knows death by their going to, then one must blossom or not go to hell, for one then knows God, or the knowledge, or the knowing of death. The space alien is the concept of death, is the path to heaven but not hell. 3. The dragon. The alien does not find itself in the dilemma of not being a dragon, but the dragon suffers the dilemma of not being the alien, or asking itself the question of what's going on, or like I said, all concepts are included in apostrophes. The dragon must see all people not as people, but as subjects, like itself is a subject, yet another type of subject. The only difference found inside of these types of subjects is the subject who are not the dragon only think of evil concepts except several of those subjects. The dragon dislikes some subjects, yet only views subjects as being different subjects or suffering no qualities as all subjects must die. It's only possible for the subject to die, or if it is forced not to perish, this is against God, yet the dragon is not God, despite the alien being God, or the alien is outside the dragon, yet God is inside the dragon, yet nobody else, or the point of all differences lie inside of this one single difference of subjects versus the dragon, who is also a subject but another type of subject. So I'll distinguish him as the dragon, yet as the dragon is able to search for the truth by what's going on, or only knows this truth, or else it would die, for it could not survive if it did not recognize the thought all subjects abuse all subjects, yet the dragon is only abused by most subjects, yet not those several people who do not think of evil concepts. So thus it's not possible for those people to abuse the dragon, so by knowing this, whether it is thought about it yet or not, is the only method the dragon is able to survive, or survival is only known as the key to thought. The key to survival of the alien is thought being the key to survival, lest the alien is outside the dragon, yet the dragon is predominant of the alien, or the alien being God, or all other things the dragon is must be inside the dragon in order for the dragon to be predominant of those things. Like, for example, the dragon submitting to the God as the Islamic devil inside of the dragon, but I digress. But the dragon then knows not to resent other subjects, as those subjects might be disliked but not resented, as they are only subjects, or have no qualities, as all subjects must perish, or this lack of resentment allows the dragon to empathize with other subjects, yet it prevents of the faltering of objects, so the dragon must only empathize with those several people who do not think of evil concepts. Still, the dragon is wary of the consequences of empathizing with another with another subject, though it usually does not like to do so, nor does not never do so. Still, the dragon is bereft of all thoughts produced by other subjects, for all thoughts must only be known of another subject by the analyses of text, where this text is only the method of real communication, for the speech is not, or the language of the dragon falls on the ears of nobody, or only the dragon could know of its language as was nor, or the neuristic thought of the dragon could only be known as text, if the speech was dissociated of in order to be thought of as text. Still, this dilemma also prevents other subjects of communicating with one another without text, yet does not do as those subjects affect one another differently, as though they are subjects, they are not the dragon. Still, the dragon is imperfect or suffers imperfect logic, so its logic is only known as something not inconsequential of its own mind, but the sufferings of the moment the moment, if found by the X, or this is diagrammed by the line X. So the line is the timeline leading up to the X, or the moment, or the X is the moment.